Good evening, everybody. Welcome to session 7 for Copilot Zero to Hero, where we'll talk a little bit about preparing Power Platform and Azure for Copilot extensions and ensuring connectivity and governance for advanced scenarios. So we will be covering quite a few things this evening. Also, just remember to please follow me on LinkedIn if you don't already, where we continuously try to post about these upcoming sessions or also other events happening from your local communities. Cool. So just quickly, what's on the agenda for this evening? We'll just do a quick introduction once again on agents, and then we'll talk about setting up Power Platform environments and why that is important on your Copilot journey. Then also talking a little bit about establishing an Azure AI landing zone. If there's anyone on the call that's worked with Azure AI landing zones before, I might just tap into that knowledge as well, because this is new to me. It's very exciting to see how it all fits together, but I don't really work in that space a lot. Mine is more the Power Platform. And then obviously talking a little bit about custom Copilot extensions, how to build and integrate them into these tools. And then just sharing some tools and resources that will set you up for success. And then, as you know, I'll always talks about it. You won't have a session with me that doesn't have homework. So there will definitely be some homework. Cool. So with that said, once again, I'm also grateful to be presenting with and doing these sessions with all these awesome peoples. I'm sure you've by now, if you've attended all of the sessions by now, you've at least seen a session from each and every one of them. So yeah, exciting times ahead. Just for those who might feel a little lost, if you don't know, you are at session 7 this evening. Session 1 to 6 has passed, but you can still register for session 8, 9, and 10 as well. And we do want to ask that you encourage your peers and those who's working on Copilot with you to also encourage them to join you for these sessions. Yes, they are being recorded and you can catch up, but let's be honest, people don't really go and watch videos after. And you also get to ask all your questions when you come to these sessions. So yeah, really encourage your peers to also join us. Maybe after that AI session tomorrow, ask some of them to come and join us for the next session that's coming up. Cool. So with that said, let's start. So just as a very high-level overview, we've been obviously talking a lot about Copilot in the series, Copilot Studio, but we haven't really talked about extending it as much, and we might be going more into deep depth with season 2, as Alice mentioned. So, but just looking at this, you'll see that there's actually various tools that you can use to create agents, and agents being the hype word these days. Agents just everywhere. I know this is not the Matrix, thank goodness. But you can actually create agents with Microsoft 365 Copilot, if you're licensed, of course. Then you can also build agents in Copilot Studio, and you'll see that this image just displays like your agents that you are building. If you're building them from Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's predominantly for users, and it's more towards the simple side of agents. It's not really complex agents that you're building. It's more declarative agents. However, you'll see as the path follows along, Copilot Studio is more for your makers, those who are kind of low code, no code developers, but do have maybe some development background. So it's can go from declarative to custom engine agents. But if you really want to go to advanced agent building, that is when you start involving Azure AI and Azure AI Foundry and the tools that's available in there. So you can really start building agents that's either really simple or super advanced, but you've got all the tools in the Microsoft tech stack that will enable you to do that. With that said, and with anything we know as we know it, is the more advanced the agents become, the more we require advanced governance and security. And oftentimes this is really not thought of immediately when building agents. However, these are things that should be, when you start building an agent or start even thinking of building an agent, these are the things that should be top of mind. So just before diving in, let's talk a little bit about why we are covering Power Platform and Azure landing zones today. is because we've all heard of the different shades of customer pain points with our current Power Platform Admin Center experience, and these pain points really touch every single stakeholder across an organization. It's just important that everyone in the business understands how everything fits together and how it all comes together. So obviously with Agent Builder in Microsoft 365 Copilot, we've got Agent Builder. You can also get agents in SharePoint. I don't know if any of you played with it. That's on the call. And then you've got Copilot Studio. And as I've mentioned, Copilot Studio integrated with Azure AI, which is predominantly for your pro coders. However, with all of these, increasing your advanced governance and security needs really needs to improve. And that's kind of a little bit of what we'll cover this evening. And that's what we'll deal into creating environments, setting up environments that allows for this governance and security setup. And the same with the Azure AI landing zones. So let's move to the next slide. So let's start with setting up Power Platform environment. So when I talk about a Power Platform environment, these are basically, if you want to summarize it, it's just a logical container for your applications, your flows, your chatbots, your agents, any connections and data, specifically maybe Dataverse, in an organization. So when you create an environment, it is creating this logical container that contains all of these components. And preparing these environments obviously properly ensures that your solutions are built in a managed and a secure, but also a scalable way. So looking at that, when you are starting your journey in the Power Platform, it is important to define a clear strategy, right? So an environment strategy, and we'll show you a little bit of a diagram as an example. Defining an environment strategy early just helps guide your solution lifecycle. It gives you enhanced data security as well as access control. So if you build out an environment strategy, you can really define who's got access to what. You can set up policies as to which connectors are allowed and which are not. It really gives support for application lifecycle management, and it follows Microsoft's guidance to minimize unmanaged environments, because oftentimes, and I think those who manage, especially those on call who needs to administrate the Power Platform Admin Center, will know that there's so many unmanaged environments, and then it becomes clunky to maintain. And therefore, it's important to define an environment strategy. The best idea is to use your environment logically. So very simple, like you would have a server setup, you would have development, you would have test or UAT, and then you would have production. Power Platform's environment works in the same way. Okay, setting up an environment structure also provides more flexibility to your advanced makers. You can identify common levels of security for your environments. You need to decide on the number and the purpose of environment. So sometimes people, just because it's very easy to spin up an environment, doesn't necessarily mean you should. There is some planning that needs to go into this. And also what I want to mention is when planning this environment strategy, you should keep in mind that it's not something that you write down, you plan, and that's kind of be the set in stone thing. This is something that's ongoing. You constantly check whether this is still the strategy that you want to go with or need. So there's various ways, and there's a lot of tips out there. I'll share a few this evening, but there's a lot of information around setting up the right environment, making sure that you've got a perfect strategy, and your Center of Excellence kit really guides you for that with that as well. Another thing to consider when setting up this environment structure is controlling which makers can create developer environments, and then obviously organizing your developer environments by region or business unit. So these are all the things you can do when you set up an environment to really kind of manage the environments and decide what sits where. Okay, so it keeps things secure. Okay, and decluttered. So just to give you a little bit of an example of what an environment strategy could look like. So this is a typical foundation of an enterprise scale environment strategy, where it obviously, whenever you're using Power Platform, there'll always be a default environment. And then, like I said, the logical flow of it would be to have a development environment, a UAT, and a prod. In this instance, this setup has got a development group environment, but they've also got a shared development group environment. And you'll notice that some of these environments are managed environments, which is also recommended. So the default environment is obviously used to build your Microsoft 365 productivity customizations. But it is advised that you kind of put on some restrictions and data policies on sharing, for instance, the limit of other types makers can create. The 4 environment groups that are created on this image here, like I've mentioned, development, shared development, UAT, and prod, creates an we actually have an environment routing policy set up for the development group, which will route makers away from the default environment into their own developer environments. This is obviously to make them not necessarily build anything in the default environment, because it's not best practice to do that. Okay. And then the shared development group supports environments that contain projects with multiple makers. Okay. So the development group is for individual development, where the shared development group is for where they need to work collaboratively on projects. The UAT group obviously contains the environments that are used to test resources before they are promoted to production. And then the production group will obviously contain the environments that host your apps, your flows, and your artifacts to use in production. Then how can you enhance this environment strategy? You can enhance it by adding pipelines. So pipelines just makes it easier to kind of push resources and solutions from one environment to another environment. So as you can see in this revised environment diagram, pipelines have been added. So the one pipeline will move resources, for example, from development to UAT, and then from there it will move it to production. However, the other pipeline, some of these pipelines you'll see. So if you just follow the pipeline arrows, you'll see what they've also added to this environment strategy is a pipeline host. So just a host that kind of takes the resources and pushes it to where it needs to go. So the basic environment strategy provides a foundation that you can build on for further use cases. Okay, any questions on setting up environments? Has anyone on the call been in the Power Platform Admin Center? Do you want me to show you what that would look like, setting up or creating those environments? Yes? No?
How badly do you want to go into it? For me, it's just, don't know, how technical do people want to get? Because if you are building agents and you want to publish an agent that doesn't say your developer name, you actually have to change stuff in the Power Platform Admin Center from a publisher perspective.
That's the one thing, and something that I picked up. So just this past Saturday, we were at a AAA hackathon where the students that attended had to build agents, and they had to use Power Apps and all of those things to connect all of it, right? And what ended up happening is they were all building it, obviously, and that's why this is important to kind of bring this home to the people and the makers, is they were building it in the default, right? What happened when they wanted to publish their custom agent that they've built? It told them, sorry, you can't publish it because it's a developer environment. So you cannot publish agents that are built in a development environment. It has to be a trial, a sandbox, or obviously production. So if you are building an agent in a development environment, you can build it, yes, but you need to push it to either a trial, a sandbox. Sandbox is one that they suggest to be a UAT. When you're setting up a UAT environment, choose sandbox. And then you can publish your agent. So all of the students, and this was like a few minutes before they had to be ready to present, were freaking out because like, I can't publish my agent. So we had to lift and shift, which was a good exercise because that also showed them. So a lot of them, and this is best practice in Power Platform, right? It is absolutely best practice, aside from environments, to do everything that you do in a solution. So all of them just went ahead and created their agents, but they didn't put it in a solution. So if you put it in a solution, then you can easily enough go export solution, takes everything you've built into your agent. And then when you export it, it takes all of that. And then when you import it into a new environment, it's easy enough to just transport or transfer into that new environment. Okay. So I think I'm not going to go into that. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out, or, happy to answer if you've got any questions. We'll continue with the next one. So just additionally, when determining or playing around with your environment strategies, things that is important to set up is obviously setting security roles and permissions, understanding who needs access to what and what that security looks like, enabling monitoring and alerts. You get some nice monitoring in the Power Platform Admin Center. And I would strongly recommend the everyone on call to use the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. There's a lot that comes with that kit, a lot of additional reporting that you get, statistics, monitor how your environment is doing. And then obviously establishing some DLP policies to govern your connector usage. This one is a good one, and you do all of this inside of the Power Platform Admin Center. And then obviously making use of the managed environments. It's optional, but it is recommended. The reason governance like this matters is it really ensures that your Power Platform can scale in your organization without compromising on security and compliance. So just some key takeaways before we move on to the next section is setting up a Power Platform environment isn't just a one-time task. As I've mentioned before, it's really an ongoing practice of governance and support. So regularly looking at the policies, regularly looking at who's got access, who shouldn't have access. Something that I've picked up also internally when it comes to workflows or apps or even agents that were shared with people, and then those people leave. There's nothing really in place to kind of remove the legacy users, and those are the kind of things that a person really needs to be aware of. So yes, that is it regarding setting up environments, and we'll get to why this is important. We're just going a little bit into explaining how to do it. So now what we'll do is we'll shift a little bit onto the Azure side of things, where we will be talking about creating Azure AI landing zones. So why do we do this? This is to support advanced AI scenarios. So in an example of custom Copilot extensions. So an Azure AI landing zone is essentially a pre-planned cloud environment. So that helps you account for key aspects like your security, networking, identity, and governance, all from day one. So by preparing a landing zone for AI, you can actually deploy your AI services like OpenAI, cognitive services, or any custom models in a structured and scalable manner, once again. So just very shortly, what is an Azure AI landing zone? So the definition that I got is, think of it as a foundation on which any AI-related resources will be built. So when deploying complex AI services such as Azure OpenAI, using a landing zone helps you manage the resources in a consistent, governed way, and it also ensures compliance and security are maintained. So as you can see, really the drive in everything that we are building, and I guess that's probably the question that we get the most, is everybody is excited to build agents, they're excited to use Copilot and AI, but the question around security always comes up. And you'll see as we are going through this content, Microsoft really does take security and compliance very seriously. It's just a matter of, once again, planning it the right way before just going and creating. So let's jump. Yes, go for it.
From a extensibility perspective, so when we talk about the Copilot ecosystem, right? I mean, we're focusing currently on what happens inside of Microsoft 365, and there was a cool slide that we did at the developer camp.
Yeah.
Where we had a slide that says no code, low code, pro code, right?
Yes.
So you start with no code, and that's all the agent stuff that you currently get on your desktop. Researcher, analyst, all the frontier stuff. We now have a weird agent that floats in Tracy's tenant for whatever the reason. that we find about today, right? They just pop up everywhere. They're like weeds. I don't work for Microsoft, so I can't say that. We then got the sort of low code, and that's the agents that you build on behalf of your organization. So you go into Copilot Studio
Copilot
and you
Studio.
do things. Foundry is where you want to bring your own developers and
Yes.
your own language models and all of those things. Now, an AI landing zone is really just like you'd spin up any other landing zone inside of your environment. If you were going to spin up containers, you'd go do a container landing zone. Now, the
Yes.
cool thing, and you can ask Warren, he's not on this call, you can actually do that from Visual Studio. You
Yes.
can
Yes, you can.
you can spin up an AI landing zone using a template from Visual
I've
Studio as
actually
part of
got,
what, yeah.
if I go here quickly, there's a GitHub repo where you actually
Yes.
have a button. The button is here
Yeah.
at the bottom, deploy to Azure.
Yeah. So that might be a bicep template or an ARM template. I can't remember which one that is. It's not Terraform, it's the Microsoft one, so probably a bicep template. But
Yeah.
you can call it from a command line inside of Visual Studio Code to spin up this, and it's got all the necessary guardrails. Just understand what it's doing when it spins stuff up because it costs money. But what you can also do is you can connect Copilot Studio to that.
That is correct. That is correct.
With the connectors. Everyone's gone MCP crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, an
And
MCP.
and you can then the extensibility of Copilot Studio where the functionality stops in Copilot Studio, you can extend that by connecting it to Foundry.
To Foundry, yes. Yeah. So building your agents and having like agents in Copilot built in Copilot Studio also talk to your Foundry agents.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. And vice versa. But we're not quite there yet. That's the dream, but it doesn't work yet. Cool. So just with regards to Azure Landing Zone, typically they address the following areas. Obviously, governance boundaries, secure networking, connectivity to data sources, identity and access management, resource organization, Azure policy and compliance, and then obviously your compute and GPU planning. And I know this feels for most of us who don't work with Azure every day, this can be like, whew, information overload. It was definitely for me. But it, in essence, is just your typical things. It's kind of like your environment. It just puts everything together and it gives you a nice place where you can really scale your solution. And it's something that you can reuse so you don't have your stuff lying all over. It once again is that logical container that's got everything already set up and you work within that space. That's probably a very high level summary. Al, I don't know if that is too high
That's
level, but
perfect.
that's pretty
I'm
much
going to go
that.
into mute and I'm going to stop talking.
Cool. So as you can see, in comparison to the environment structure that I've shown you for Power Platform Admin Center and planning an environment strategy, from there, this one obviously is a little bit more complex, but there's so many things that you can add, right? So this is basically the image that you are seeing here, and I'll share the resource to this. Someone actually went through the effort of building this in Visio, which you can download. The Azure OpenAI Landing Zone is a reference architecture. So what you see here is called a reference architecture, and this integrates a variety of services to create a seamless infrastructure for running OpenAI workloads. Okay. Any questions on this image? Al, I don't know if there are questions. If you want to maybe run people through this, I don't know if you want to go into that level of detail.
Rex, there's one thing I want to add that just maybe simplifies it a bit.
Sure.
Like we started with the Copilot side, or the M365 Copilot, which is largely the front end.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jackie showed us how to do some of the information preparation in SharePoint and setting up metadata and columns. And she also touched on, building kind of the application layer or the business process layer in Copilot Studio. And the Azure side is really the infrastructure that you want to deploy for Azure. And what I like about this is that they can, as you mentioned earlier, they can all work together,
Correct.
which is quite nice. And then it allows you to really build out the solutions that you want to. And why are we talking about a landing zone and a Power Platform environment is that without these things, you can't deploy the technologies. You actually can't consume or use the technologies in a safe and a secure way. So
Yes.
I think you're doing a fantastic job in describing really completely different worlds for each one of those three. But hopefully that just gives like a business sense of why we're talking about these like foundations. Yeah.
100%. And thanks for adding that, Jason. Yes, because I mean, as we are on this Copilot 0 to Hero journey, you know, things start simple, but at some point in time, it does become more complex because, and that's just, it goes in any industry. The more you show a user what's possible, they go, ooh, can we also build this or can we build that? And then these solutions are there for the more complex requirements that's coming up. So that's why it's really important to know about these things and learn about them, because it's such a broad space right now, and there's so much happening in obviously Copilot Studio, Microsoft 365 Copilot, but then also on the Foundry side. And you can really use these tools to build up a great solution. And but it is once again very important to know that let's put the proper measures in place to ensure that everybody is doing what they're doing securely. Okay. So thanks so much for adding that as well. So let's just go through a little bit of a quick step-by-step on building and putting a landing zone together. This is obviously very high level. It's just a little bit of the sense that I've made from this. So obviously Azure landing zones provide a solid foundation for your cloud environment. And when deploying the complex AI services such as Azure OpenAI, using a landing zone approach really helps you manage your resources in a structured, consistent manner. So once again, very simple. Like we said, it's very simple. It's similar to how you would in the past if we were to create a ASP.NET solution. We would once again put everything in a solution in VS Code, and then publish it to wherever it needs to publish. This is literally this, but just in Azure and Power Platform. Okay, so the first step is obviously to set up your core infrastructure, creating a resource hierarchy, your management groups, your subscriptions for AI, all of those things. The next thing you want to look at is obviously networking and connectivity. You know, in an AI shared services subscription, setting up the virtual network topologies, your VNets, or like it says, include a hub for VNet and the subnets for the various services. So making sure that the networking and connectivity is set up. And for those of us on the call, this might not be what we set up, but we might have infrastructure teams that set these things up. So it is important to at least know when they do talk of this, we understand what process they went through to get to where they are. Then obviously deploy management and monitoring. So set up solutions for monitoring and logging, very important. Azure Monitor is really amazing with giving you logs and analytics. Also, application insights. You can get further application insights in Azure Monitor for even your Power Platform, your copilots and agents that you've built in there. So it really helps you keep track of who's doing what inside of your environment, and also how to limit people to not just go completely bonkers because now we've got AI. So need to ensure that that is in place. The next steps that we need to follow is obviously provisioning our AI services. So obviously deploying the needed AI resources, as we mentioned, whether it is OpenAI, whether it is cognitive services, whatever it is, we'll set up all those things when we're provisioning for the AI services. Then we need to ensure that connectivity is set up for Copilot extensions. So once again, it feels like this topic, because even when I was getting everything together, I was like, this feels so unrelated to Copilot, but it is so related to Copilot, because our Copilot instance that we have now is really infiltrated into everything that we do. Once again, using the example of the agent that just popped up into the Teams channel that Tracy mentioned earlier, you know, they really, when Microsoft said they want to add agents to everything and AI to all of our apps, they weren't joking. This is really becoming the reality of all our development. So we need to ensure that connectivity is set up for Copilot extensions so that we can build, and I know this is very relevant, especially in the banking space, where the bank would much rather build their own Copilot instead of using the existing ones, so as to, not manage the users, but make sure whatever the users do, they can still enhance or improve their productivity, but do so securely. The biggest thing here is security and governance, making sure that we have those logs and monitoring what's happening inside of our own spaces. Then obviously, once all of those things have been set up, we need to test and validate to make sure that our landing zone setup is working as expected. And then lastly, we just obviously need to make sure that it is operational. So really, in summary, setting up an Azure AI landing zone involves really an upfront effort. It is a lot of effort that goes into building this and putting this landing zone together, but it is helpful in the long run. So I don't know if you all remember, but there's that quote, I think, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail kind of thing. I think that's the quote. But planning this really helps you and sets you on top of your game so that you know what you have set up and it's reusable. So you can reuse that kind of setup again. And it just makes setting up these things so much easier. So if you've created a landing zone, it's scalable, it's repeatable, it's an environment where your AI services can just be plugged in without starting from scratch each time. Okay, any questions on this before we move on to the next section? Or comments, doesn't have to be questions, comments. Somewhere if I've missed the bus completely, also let me know. Cool.
Karika, you're doing well. If I can understand this and it's clear, then I think you're doing a good role, because I'm from the modern work team as well, so this is also a different world to me.
I think the big thing when you start moving into resources that run inside of Azure, right? Understand that it's attached to an Azure subscription, which is usually attached to a credit card.
To a cost, yes.
Okay, all right.
That is very important, Al, and that's a really, really important thing to remember, that, especially in Azure, everything in Azure, once you spin up a service, that comes at a cost, and it's understanding what those costs are as well.
Yeah, so just, with great power comes great responsibility. I don't know the size of your organization. Some organizations have got, I'm going to call it credit, where they've said to Microsoft they're going to spend X amount of money every month, and you will probably eat into that if this is not done well. But chances are, if you're working for a financial institution, you will never get access to anything in Azure. All right, so you're going to have to come up with a budget, and there is, just trying to remember now, there is a Foundry calculator, and it's not necessarily based on this landing zone that you're looking at right now. And you're going to have to look at the landing zone, that pretty picture that Karika showed you. And she also mentioned GPUs, the things that create speed inside of any, it will tell you the amount of tokens per second it can actually generate, right? So for the technical people, the bigger the GPU, the more money you're going to spend, the faster the response is going to be.
100%. And I guess that's why we get, even with, the likes of ChatGPT, the premium you get, that's going to improve your experience versus being just using the free model.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Al.
Cool.
Awesome. So jumping into, and this is the reason we discussing all these things beforehand, is because at one stage or another, we will hit a point where we want to build either a custom Copilot or extend an existing one, because maybe the existing Copilot does an amazing job, but there's just this one thing that it's lacking. And if it could just do this one thing for me, it would really improve my experience. So there are ways that we can build custom Copilots, but also extend them. So And I'll give a little bit of a real world scenario soon. So, but one of the exciting advanced scenarios we want to enable is the use of custom Copilot extensions, where you can literally, as Microsoft says, you can build your own Copilot, right? So obviously, how do you do that? You can build your own Copilot by using plugins, connectors, adding agents. You can use Copilot Studio to create low-code extensions, or you can connect your Copilot to internal systems. So internally with our clients, we don't work with Microsoft Dynamics a lot, but you would have, for those who do, you would have seen there's a lot of Copilots added to those solutions as well, like Copilot for sales, for finance. There's a lot of Copilots doing the round, so you can really connect them to your internal systems. And you can enable Copilot to retrieve data or perform actions. That's kind of where we're moving towards, where it doesn't just become a back and forth conversation thing. It's a case of it can actually trigger some actions and do stuff and take out the mundane tasks that we often have to sit, and it takes up so much time. You can, by creating an agent, it can automatically kick off those tasks. Okay, so extensions allow Copilot to do more than just search Microsoft 365. It really makes it accessible even to your power users and not just for developers. So as we've mentioned, especially if you're using Copilot Studio, it enables your low-code users to also build their own agents. They don't necessarily have to wait for the IT team to come and build this very complex system. They can just build their own. Okay, so how do you build and secure this new extension? So to build a custom extension, you'll obviously need a secure API and a plugin manifest. So, but you can use graph connectors if your goal is, for instance, data retrieval. Governance, once again, is key. So treating your extensions like apps with access to sensitive data. Jason actually told us almost like an arm hair raising story this weekend. So governance really is key when it comes to building these agents and ensuring that your people has access to only the data that they need access to ensure authentication, monitor your logs, and yeah. So real world example is like imagining a sales Copilot. Yes, I just mentioned Sales Copilot in Dynamics 365. But let's say the company builds a Sales Copilot that connects to a legacy CRM system via an API. Maybe the API is hosted in Azure. By using Copilot Studio, the developers can create an agent that can answer questions like, what was the revenue for the client in the last quarter? Or they can schedule a follow-up call with another client in next week. So a Copilot extension calls the CRM's API to get the revenue data or to create an event in the calendar. And that's why understanding APIs and connecting to those securely is important. Okay, and then obviously once this agent is deployed, a salesperson can simply just ask Copilot in a natural language to get those results or perform those actions without really manually pulling reports or clicking through the CRM legacy system. So a properly set up Azure environment, in other words, our landing zone, that's hosting the API and connecting to the CRM database would then allow for a secure connection. So that is kind of why we went over all of this, and possibly, obviously, if a custom Power Platform connector was used, we can then allow Power Automate to use the same API, and this is maybe another angle. And that's why we spoke about both the Power Platform environment setup versus, not really versus, or the Azure landing zone. It doesn't mean if you're creating environments and you want to go create agents that you now have to set up a landing zone. We're just showing you all the options that exist, depending on how complex the agent or Copilot that you're building becomes. Okay. Cool. So with that said, let's just go over some tools and resources that will set you up for success. So obviously regarding governance, adoption, and development resources, this is specifically relating to the Power Platform. You can obviously, there's always Microsoft Learn. Whenever you're in doubt, you can always go to Microsoft Learn and maybe find a topic there. You can also get, there's Power Platform adoption guidance, which will align your business goals with the platform strategy. There's a workbook. So something that I really appreciate about Microsoft is the amount of resources that's available if there's anything you want to do. Then there's also the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, in short, the COE Starter Kit, that gives you some dashboards. It helps with automation. It gives you app usage insights. It really is very helpful, especially if you are, once again, earlier in the series, we've mentioned that you identify champions. So very similar to how you would with just adopting Copilot, you would also have some champion makers that has certain access or more access than others because they've kind of developed themselves. They're a little bit more advanced in certain things. And the COE Starter Kit helps you put that in place as well. Then obviously use managed environments. Make use of the application lifecycle management and DevOps tools that you have, CI/CD pipelines for the Power Platform. And then obviously there's always the community that you can reach out to, forums, blogs. There's also licensing guides available if licensing is a little bit confusing. So that's it from a Power Platform perspective. That was too fast. And then also just making use of the resources that's available from being AI ready from an infrastructure perspective and also following some learning paths. Once again, we've got the Azure Architecture Center. We've got Azure OpenAI Docs. You've got Terraform/Bicep models. I think Alistair mentioned Bicep models earlier. Once again, Microsoft Learn is a good resource. And we'll share all these links as well when we upload everything to GitHub. You've got Azure Monitor and Sentinel that you can check for telemetry and anomaly detection. And then there's a lot of case studies. Something that I've also seen is there's a lot of case studies available, people that's willing to share that they've done this is how they did it. So have a look at that. And then obviously the calculators, as Alistair has mentioned as well, you get those for Azure, but you also get calculators for Copilot Studio, so that you can see what costs could amount to. So lastly, just some homework. I'm quickly going to ship over just to the homework. So obviously with the homework, we've got a few exercises, just a little bit of a knowledge check. So it's a bit of a checklist just to see how well prepared you are from a Power Platform and Azure environment perspective. So you kind of have a statement. I see the answer is there as well, true or false, but we've made it easy for you. But please skill up yourself in terms of these things. It's very, very important. Then we've got a hands-on exercise. So for those of you who haven't gone through this exercise, please play with it. Create yourself an environment in Power Platform. Go through the steps of creating it, setting it up. And then we've got a hands-on exercise from an Azure landing zone planning, not necessarily setting it up, but just planning a landing zone and what that could potentially look like. And then exploring a Copilot extension. So just some activity, a research activity that you can do on if you were to extend a Copilot, what would that look like for your business? So obviously, it's not mandatory, but it is helpful if you go through these homework exercises. And we would love to really hear back from you what you guys have done in your industries as well. So just once again, the homework is there to reinforce the concepts that we've covered today. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I know the session went very quickly, but there's not so much to say because I don't want to go into everything at such a deep level, but these are the possibilities that you have